markets are preparing for the biggest bull run in the history of crypto, and in this video we discuss what happens before it actually is going to take off. Let's get started. The markets have been correcting in the past week as Ethereum has been going up from $2,000 to close to $4,000, which is quite normal as August is also a period of correction if we go back in time on every year that the markets have been trading. And that is usually a very normal coincidence in the markets. But before we're going to dive into the content of this video, we just released a new episode of New Era Finance on the New Era Finance podcast channel. And this time we have a discussion about optimism and Ethereum with the head of product of OKEx, Sam McInville. For me, it was super valuable because optimism is building a product that is heavily being used in the Ethereum ecosystem and nobody knows about it. Base chain has been built through the OP stack, which is kind of a toolkit that Optimism has designed. More than 70% of the layer 2 transactions are being done by Optimism. And those are all things why I decided to invest into Optimism. And that's why I think it's super valuable to watch the episode. But what we can see is that 90% of the people that watch the episodes haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel. So I would like to ask you for a small favor, which is to subscribe to the podcast channel with the link in the description beneath. And then we'll make sure to provide the best guests and conversations possible with the podcast channel and potentially even make it a weekly show. Now, that's enough of an intro. Let's talk about the markets. And today it's going to be a little bit more about how trading works. We run our own fund, we have a venture capital, and that's why we kind of changed the dynamics of trading in the markets. That's also what we're going to be doing with the altcoin portfolio, which is trading it a bit more actively. And in the previous months, we have seen a massive surge upwards as Ethereum has gone up by 50% in July. And as you can see next to me, it's one of the strongest months in the history of ETH, but it couldn't break through the crucial resistance. You can see a red line, horizontal line, and that is the highest monthly close that we've seen in the past 1.5 years on ETH. And even due to the strength of last month, we couldn't close above that level. So that marks a very interesting resistance zone that once we break through it, that's where the party starts to kick in, and that's where likely the confidence comes back into the markets where people are tending to go more risk on into the ecosystem of ETH. So right now we can see that there is a correction taking place before we start to break out, and that is quite normal given the fact that if we look at Ethereum from earlier this year, Ethereum was valued at 3.6K and even touched $4,000 in December of 2024. And you could question whether Ethereum was actually valued at a true price during that period. And traders look at a price of an asset right now and question if we value the asset in 1 month's time, is the valuation of the price right now going to be the price in a month or not? And if your thesis is going to be the markets are likely going to be valued higher, then you're looking to buy the asset. And if you think the price is going to go down, that's likely going to be a short from that standpoint. And that is also what I've seen in the episode of the Wintermute CEO with Kevin on When Shift Happens. Very interesting market maker perspective, and that's how most of the pros are looking at the market. So if we look at Ethereum at the beginning of the year, you could say that that wasn't the real price of Ethereum at that point, and there was some mispricing taking place. Now, if we go into the previous month, we can see that Ethereum was valued 50% lower in July, marking a price of 1.8K or potentially even lower during the period, resulting into a big mispricing because since January to July, we've seen Ethereum ETF staking taking place, or is likely going to happen. We saw the Clarity Act, we saw the approval of the Genius Act, we saw Robinhood launching tokenized stocks on Arbitrum, which is on ETH. And we saw the amount of stablecoin supply surging on ETH and the activity in DeFi in general consistently going up towards new all-time highs. Which then questions like, if Ethereum was valued at 3.6k in the beginning of the year and it's now 1.8k, it's by far the easiest trade to make, because realistically the price should be higher than what the price was in December based on all the things that have fundamentally been happening into the markets. That's why I keep on repeating that macro has been pushing down the price instead of crypto in general. So that's why we can see that those mispricing opportunities are opportunities in the markets, and that's where the markets are going to come in with volume. And that's why we see the price of Ethereum currently stalling around that resistance zone, which initiated the big impulse move upwards, which then creates a move that is more volatile than the average volatility of the asset. So let's say Ethereum usually moves between 10% up and 10% down during a month. If then a month kicks in where Ethereum is going to move up by 50% or more, then it's out of its normal bandwidth, and that is going to provide a case that people are not really eager to step into the asset. So if it is going from 2.1k to 3.7k in 1 month, as you can see in the chart, then people are not really eager to buy at 3.6k because there is a substantial risk of the asset going down in the short term. And the same can be said for people that have been buying at lower valuations that yielded themselves 50% in a month. Of course, they are going to take profits, given the fact that if you compound those returns, you will have a absolutely massive API. So this principle is also happening in the altcoin markets, and that's where these waves are going to happen and continue to happen. And on top of that, we have the money flow cycle. So Bitcoin moves first, then Ethereum moves, which we have seen. We are in an Ethereum cycle at this point. And then the next trigger, which is when the markets are going to break above the crucial resistance point that we discussed with Ethereum, that's where the altcoins start to kick in. However, the altcoins are currently still rejecting at crucial resistance points. So that's making it interesting to look at the charts and see how they are building up towards the actual big breakout, which we call the big bull run that we're all looking for. So time to look at the charts and see what the altcoins are actually providing at this point. As I just discussed, the altcoins haven't been getting any big momentum as of yet. It was primarily Ethereum doing great in the previous month. And yes, of course, we have some outliers, but most of the altcoins haven't really get the excitement and the money that you usually see when the markets are going to go ballistic. And that's why we need to look at the charts. First of all, we have the move of Ethereum. I wanted to dive into this, in which you can see that during the first week of January, we were swimming around 3.6k. And during the period of May and June and July, we were moving around 1.6 to 2.1k, creating that big gap. And right now, with the current price action of Ethereum, we are still facing that big resistance point, which means that if from this standpoint, we're taking out the liquidity on the long side. So people that are leveraged long need to be wiped out to get enough liquidity for buyers to step into the markets and to make a new thesis of where they think the markets are going to go to. In that sense, if we call that actual correction, but if we're going to go sub 3.4k, then it becomes very interesting risk reward wise to start looking at buys on Ethereum again. And that's where you start to see the stabilization and interest of the markets to come in. And that is also where the interest on the altcoins are going to come in. So the same thesis can be made on stuff like Optimism, which you can see is currently consolidating within a window of between, what is the low, 45 cents to 90 cents for pretty much the past 6 months. And as we recall, the longer a period of consolidation and accumulation happens, the bigger the breakout will be. And as you can see in the previous months, yes, because Ethereum started to move up, Optimism started to move up too, but it has been underperforming. and it has been rejecting at this resistance point, which is similar to what we just discussed with Ethereum. If people think that optimism at 50 cents is mispriced and it should be priced higher, likely some of them are going to take profits around this resistance point, while nobody or less people are going to be buying the asset at that resistance point. That's just how market dynamics work. And in that sense, we're currently correcting, and we get into a period where buyers are going to be eager to step in. And once we crack that resistance point, that is where the actual excitement starts to happen, which I'll get to in a little bit. But the primary example in this dynamic is the consolidation of Bitcoin since February 2024 all the way towards October of 2024. And that also lines up with the fact that I don't believe we're going to be peaking with the markets later this year. I think it's going to be a longer cycle. But as you can see, markets have been moving between 70K and 53K for a long period of time, as we just had to find a new equilibrium of people buying and selling Bitcoin before we could have had the big breakout. And that big breakout took place by going through this resistance point. And as you can see, once we start taking out this first high here, that is where the support and the buyers started to kick in, which also meant that the moment we started moving upwards in a pretty vertical way, that is where the shorts are getting triggered or liquidated. That's where the longs are stepping in, and that's where the entire escalation of the move itself happens, which then is also likely going to happen with all those altcoins, because what happens before a big run up takes place is that all the liquidity on both sides are getting taken, and then we start to squeeze with the price, and then the big surge starts to happen. And the further we get into the bull cycle, the likelihood of a higher price in that vertical move to happen is more significant. So if we look at VeChain, for instance, we've had some minimal bull cycles taking place in the previous years. So we had this peak in February of 2023. We corrected all the way down and found ourselves into support, and we created lower highs. And once we start tapping into those highs, that is where the big surge took place towards 4 cents, which is around 150% and even higher, as you can see here. After this recent high, the same momentum downwards took place. And right now we're in the same period of time where it's just going to take some time before the big breakout on VeChain, for instance, is going to happen. And I would assume that it's likely going to happen in somewhere September or October of this year. And then likely, given that the recent highs were higher, we are going to get into a more sophisticated move towards potentially even 12 cents, which then also combines the fact with things like Wormhole, where it rejected at the crucial resistance point where traders are taking profit that have been buying on lower levels. And most of the people that have been buying here are likely not really moving their own positions, hence why we're still stagnant here. But once we crack this resistance zone, that is where all the liquidity here is going to be taken. And that is where I think the asset as Wormhole is likely going to move to 20 to 25 cents. And that's where I think that, for instance, optimism is likely going to move to anything above $1.50. So that is how markets behave. And that is why the current period on altcoins is still very boring. But in order to have a big bull run on altcoins, you need to have this period. The action on the track is heating up, and now it's your chance to be part of the action. OKEx is the primary partner of the McLaren F1 team and is giving away official McLaren F1 team caps to new users, and there's more. You also have the chance to win one of the 3 VIP experiences in Zandvoort in full papaya style. And now this is what you need to do. You need to sign up to OKEx using the link in the description beneath. You need to create an account. You need to make your first crypto trade, and then you will receive one of those caps at your home. And if you already have an account, if you refer a friend, you will also get one of those caps. these caps won't last forever and the VIP experience won't last forever either. So you need to sign up before the 8th of August to be part of the entire challenge and to be part of this giveaway. It's a once in a lifetime, so make sure to join through the link in the description beneath, and perhaps we'll see each other in Zandvoort. The markets are eager to break to the upside, but right now it feels like a ghost town. And sometimes it just takes a lot of time before the markets will be moving upwards. And in order to have that to happen, we need to have more confidence. And more confidence comes in when Ethereum cracks that crucial resistance point. That is when people start to feel confident to go into more altcoins. Similarly with Solana breaking upwards, people start buying meme coins. That is also when you see a lot of people going back into social media, starting watching my content, starting exploring new altcoins on Twitter. All those things start to happen during that period. So right now, it's a very similar move to what has been happening in previous years on the altcoin markets. And I think we're going to see a lot of momentum on them. But in order to get there, we need to go through the boring state, which is right now. And I think that the easiest to get a high return is to buy during those boring states to hold, because once they go, it's super hard to get into any position. I hope you have enjoyed this update. I'll see you again on the next one. Ciao.